Yesterday I had the blessing of going to our Parakletos monastery to do the Divine Liturgy. It's always kind of interesting because Yarandisa there doesn't speak English, and so she requests that everything be done in Greek. Yeah, exactly. Thank God I had a deacon there to help me. But you know what struck me? By the way, this is free. This is not on your bill. We'll get to the homily in just a second. That's part of your bill. But what struck me was the beauty of the liturgy no matter what. The event of the liturgy no matter what. In fact, I remember telling the deacon, who was a convert himself, and he didn't speak Greek very well either. So here we were with these Greek nuns, and few of us. Jacob came with me, so he was commiserating with me. So, but most everybody spoke Greek, but nobody spoke the Greek of the liturgy because that Greek isn't spoken anymore. But what was amazing was that no matter what, the body and blood of Christ was consecrated. The people were fed the timeless Eucharist of the faith. The work was done. The good work was done. And make no mistake about it, dear ones, it was work. I was sweating by the end of it. Just ask the boys back there. By the end of this liturgy, I'll be sweating. It's work. That's the reason why I kind of get tickled sometimes when people say, "Oh, Father, the liturgy was so boring today." I mean, that can happen. Goodness gracious alive. After you say something the same thing, 50 billion times, it's easy for that to get boring. But the reason why it's boring isn't because of the words. It's because of the asleep soul. Because if you listen to the words, the soul catches fire. If you pay attention to the movements, the soul catches fire. If you practice the Orthodox faith, the soul catches fire. It's when the soul's fire has gone out that the words are boring, and the work is tedious, and the liturgy is monotonous. I confess to you folks, I'm kind of glad it's monotonous because as far as my soul is concerned, and I know some of you will too, you need something that goes against your grain and that doesn't feed your ego and feed your passions. You need something that insists that you either pay attention, suck it up, snowflake, and do the work. It's good for you. You won't die. Or maybe you will. I don't know. But the point is, this is good for you. But just like eating your spinach when you're young, a lot of times that's not fun. Okay. It's okay as an adult not to constantly be in a state of entertainment. It was a shock to my children whenever I told them that you actually don't have to be being entertained every second of every waking moment of your life. That's okay. Really? What an amazing concept. This really brings me to the homily today. Many of you know that I have a fairly, I don't want to say large presence, but I have a fairly significant presence on social media. And that's good and bad. And the reason why it's good is because I'm convinced if St. Paul were here today, he would be on every possible social media there was talking about the faith. That's what he'd do. Because spreading the word was his thing, man. It really was. He really believed with all his heart that every human being that breathed air ought to be a follower of Jesus Christ. I agree with him. I think every human being that breathes air ought to follow Jesus Christ, ought to be an Orthodox Christian. I believe you ought to be an Orthodox Christian. Everybody. Everybody incoming ought to come to this church. Everybody. We don't have the building for it yet. Let's get on with it. But I believe that. I believe every person deserves to be Orthodox. I believe that with all my heart. So because I believe that with all my heart, and I believe everybody should be able to be Orthodox, that's the way I conduct my ministry. I assume that every person I meet, if we start talking about the faith, I'm going to give them an opportunity to become Orthodox. I'm going to give them an on-ramp to learn how to enter the Orthodox faith. That's just the way it is, guys. Because I believe with all my heart that every human being deserves to be Orthodox, because Orthodoxy is the fullness of the Christian faith, period, full stop, end of discussion. This is the healthy faith that makes a man or a woman enabled to enjoy eternity forever and call it heaven, instead of being stuck in eternity and calling it hell. By the way, if you don't like the liturgy, for heaven's sake, don't go to heaven. You're going to hate it there. Because that's all we're going to do. Some of you are very depressed right now. I understand. It's okay. But because of that, there is a high likelihood that I'm going to run into people who want to fuss and want to argue. I don't know if you've ever been on Facebook before. But that happens. And the Apostle Paul is writing to his young son Timothy today, and he's telling him some extremely important truths. The first part of chapter 3 of the book of Titus, if you have your program, you can look at the passage that I'm going to look at here in just a second. In the first part of chapter 3, before we get to the pericope for today, the Apostle Paul is talking about the faith that Jesus Christ has established, and it's a faith that redeems. What do I mean by that word redeem? It is a salvage effort to allow you to become who you were made to be in the first place. The Orthodox Christian faith is meant to change you into who you are really supposed to be. That's the purpose of the Orthodox faith. The Orthodox faith is meant to teach you how to tame your passions so that your passions become gifts and not masters. That's something I struggle with in my life. There are places where I think I've got a pretty good handle on it. There are other times when I don't have much of a handle on it at all. Most of the time in your life and in my life, the places where our passions are mastering us are clear to everybody, by the way. You're not going to hide them. Everybody knows. It's clear to you. And so the faith is meant, and that's what the Apostle Paul is telling his son Titus. Titus, the faith is meant to change you into being who you were made to be. This is what he's telling. And he said that the very first symptom of becoming a healthy human being is, and this is going to be tough for those of us in the past that I grew up in, is good works. You've heard me quote the great Orthodox theologian Forrest Gump before. And you've heard me say, orthodoxy is as orthodoxy does, brothers and sisters. You can say that you're orthodox till you're green, but if you never do the works of an Orthodox Christian, then it's always potential. It's never actual. It's always what could be and never what is. And the Apostle Paul tells his young son Timothy, who is the pastor of a church, he's in his first pastorate as a priest, as a young priest. That's why I like him so much. Son, the purpose of the faith is for your people to become active in doing good works. That's the first symptom that they are actually embracing the faith in their everyday life. And then he says, this is what I love. He says, the saying is sure, I desire you to insist on these things. I like that. You mean I'm just supposed to just tell folks this is what they got to do? Yeah. I want you to insist on these things. That's so weird in nowadays where it's I'm okay and you're okay and you know everybody ought to just be able. Can't we all just get along? Well, in just a second we're going to find out the answer is no, we can't all get along. So that those who have believed in God may be careful to apply themselves to good deeds. These are excellent and profitable to men. And then he gets to the heart of the matter. But avoid stupid controversies. Genealogies, dissensions, and quarrels over the law, for they are unprofitable and futile. In fact, I've discovered most church arguments are exactly like that. Unprofitable and futile. They're a waste of time. Most dissensions, most problems in most communities, in most families. Have you ever been in an argument with your spouse and it goes so long you wonder, what were we arguing about again? It happens. Have you ever been arguing with somebody else going, I don't recall what the problem was. What was it again? They are futile. They're a waste of time. And then he goes on, as for a man, I want you to listen to this, because there are some folks who they love to argue. They love it more than they love breathing. They love it. As for a man who is factious, you know what the word factious means, don't you? Divide us all up. You're on their team, but I'm on this team over here, so we must be enemies. But as for a man who is factious, after admonishing him once or twice, watch this, have nothing more to do with this man, knowing that such a person is perverse and sinful, he is self-condemned. I'm going to stop there so we can all take a breath. The Apostle Paul writes to Titus and says that the first symptom of someone taking their faith seriously is their behavior. You've heard me use this illustration before. It's like somebody saying they're the biggest Atlanta Falcons fan in the world. Oh, you're a big Falcons fan. Oh, yes, yes. Well, what do you think about the new quarterback? Oh, I don't know who that is. But I'm the biggest Falcons fan in the world. So what do you think about the new defense system that they've got? I don't know what you're talking about. But I am the number one Falcon fan in the world. Oh, well, then you must have season tickets. Oh, no, I never go to a game. But I am the number one Falcon fan in the world. Oh, so then surely you watch them on television. No, I don't catch them on television. I'm usually doing something else. But I'm the number one Falcon fan in the world. You're picking up what I mean here, don't you? It reminds me of an old sergeant who told me one time in police work, son, don't let your mouth write a check your fist can't fill out. The Orthodox faith is meant to be lived. Here's what's going to happen when you do that, brothers and sisters. If you are a person who loves to avoid conflict, you're going to be made unhappy by this. Because when you live your Christian faith and do good deeds, you will understand that the reality is most people do not live out the convictions they say they believe. They don't. I don't. I wish I did. I'm working on it. Maybe you struggle with the same thing. But the first symptom of a man or a woman taking their faith seriously is a human being actually practicing the faith. Wednesdays and Fridays we fast. We fast before the Eucharist on Sunday morning. We go to confession on a regular basis. Somebody asked me one time, Father, how often should I go to confession? You know what the answer is, don't you? Every time you need to. Father, I'll be here every day. Okay. We practice the fasting and the feasting of the church. We prioritize worship over other activities. Let me change that. We prioritize worship over all other activities. Period, full stop, end of discussion. Because knowing God is the most important thing in our lives. Now, if you live this way, you're going to run into people who are going to be factious. They're going to want to argue. Just get on Facebook for 15 minutes and start talking about religion. And you'll have folks wanting to fuss with you. Avoid the arguments, my friends. Live the life. Avoid the arguments. And if somebody insists on being a troublemaker, after talking to them once or twice about it, don't have anything else to do with them. Don't have anything to do with them. Your life is filled with enough drama than adding to it by keeping people in your life that are going to do nothing but fuss and complain and point out mistakes or point out problems. Listen, folks, there's enough of life going on without having to add that to it. Don't do it. Foolish and unlearned questions, avoid. On this Sunday of the Holy Fathers, understand the power of the consistent witness of the saints of the church to call you to a different way of living so that your life reflects what you say you believe rather than just your words and your life reflecting something completely opposite. Don't be that contentious person. Don't be that troublemaker. Don't be that one who loves to argue. Be the one who lives the faith. Like my mama used to say, honey, your actions are so loud, I can't hear a word you're saying. Let that be you this morning. That's the wisdom of the saints. That's the testimony of the fathers. That's the Orthodox faith. Amen.